It's time to start learning about TypeScript syntax, and for that we need a new file inside our project. So go ahead and create new file and name it main.ts for TypeScript. And then here we're going to start with declaring a let variable and name it first name and set it to John. Now we just wrote normal JavaScript, but if I hovered over first name, I will find that first name is of type string. So now we can find the same thing with pure JavaScript, but let's try to set this let variable to 5. Now we got an error. If you hover over that error, you'll find that TypeScript is complaining about the type or the assigned value to this variable. It says type number is not assignable to type string because 5 here is a number and John is a string. So it's like TypeScript is saying that if you assign this variable from the beginning to a string, you have to keep it like that. This is why TypeScript is helpful, because it prevents small bugs like this from appearing inside our project. Now we want the first name variable to be always of type string. But let's imagine that another developer comes in and he changed the value of the first name variable to a number, let's say like 10. Now the errors has disappeared from the second line or the third line here, but we have introduced another bug, because here first name variable is no longer of type string, but it's of type number. Now you might ask yourself why TypeScript didn't alert us that we have made a mistake. Well, it's obvious, because we didn't tell her to do that. So in order to tell TypeScript to only accept strings for this variable, we have to add a colon and then string. Now you can see that we got 2 errors. Well, it's the same error but in 2 different places. It has the same message as before. Number is not assignable to type string. The same message, we can find it here. To fix this, we can just remove the 10 from here and replace it with a string, John. We can actually remove this because it's a let variable and assign this variable in the 3rd line like this. And here we can see that the errors has disappeared. But let's just keep it in 1 line. So I'm going to take this again, remove the first name from here and assign this to John. Now if you want to declare a number instead of string, we can create another variable and name it age, set the type to number, and then assign it to any number. Going to choose 22. And now you know that if you do this, you'll get an error saying that type string is not assignable to type number. Now we don't have only strings and numbers, we also have objects. So let's declare another let variable, name it obj for object, and then set it to an object with the property first name set to John. Now in the next line, let's try to reassign the first name property to a number and see what's going to happen. So object dot first name equals 5. Now here you can see that we have an error from TypeScript saying type number is not assignable to type string. And that's expectable, because declaring object properties is similar to declaring normal variables. And same thing if we try to assign the object to the first name variable, we will get the same error, and this time type string is not assignable to type and then the object that we assigned to the obj variable from the beginning. Now let's remove this and assign the obj variable type to an object. Now you can see that we didn't get any errors, but I want to make it clear for the eyes that this obj variable is an object that contains a first name property of type string. We can do that by removing the object from here, replace it with two curly braces, and inside here add the first name property and set it to type string. Now let's say that I want to add a new property to this object, for example age. We will get an error saying that type object with property first name string and age number, it's not assignable to the object that has only first name property of type string. Now this is going to be very helpful if we want our object to only contain a very specific properties. And of course, if we want to add the age property, which is a number, we can come here and then add age of type number, and the arrow will disappear. Now after strings, numbers, and objects, let's see how we can define functions with Typescript. So let's declare a new function and name it create user. This function will accept two arguments. First one is the first name, second one is the age. Now you can see here we have two errors. First name, or the parameter first name, implicitly has an any type. Now functions arguments are also variables, and JavaScript set the type of these arguments by default to the type any, but Typescript doesn't allow that, so we need to add types for these arguments. So for the first name, add string, and for the age, it's a number. Now let's return something from this function. Return first name plus the age. You can see that we didn't get any errors because even Typescript know that we want to convert the age to a string and then concatenate it with the first name variable. Now if you change the plus sign with the minus sign, you will get an error because Typescript knows that performing a subtraction operation between a string and a number is not logical. So let's remove all of this and replace it with a literal string, and inside it we will have first name, then add the first name variable, and then age, add the age variable. Create another variable and name it str for string, and then let's execute the create user function. Now you can see here that we need two arguments, so let's add first name to John and the age to 22. Now if you hover over the str variable, you'll find it of type string. We can specify the return type of a function as we can do it for a variable using a colon here and then add type string. Now let's say I want to return an object from this function. For that, I'm going to change this with object, and we will get an error saying that type string is not assignable to type object, but the variable str is of type object. Now let's fix this error by removing this string and replace it with an object. The error is gone, but let's say I want to return this object with an age property set to the age argument. If I want to use the return value of the current user function, which is an object that's supposed to contain an age property, we will get an error saying that property age does not exist in type object. You can fix that by removing this add an object and the age property with the type number. Now if you hover over age, you'll see that age does exist and it has type number. Let's add also the first name inside this object and set it equal to first name argument. Here we have an error because we have to add the first name property to the return type of this function. So first name of type string. Alright. Now let's say that if we have an age higher than 20, we're going to reject that age and only return the first name. So here, let's add an if statement and check that if the age is equal or bigger than 20. If so, we're going to return only an object with the first name property. Now Typescript doesn't want to let me return this object without the age property. That's because we told her that this function is going to return an object with only the age property of type number and the first name property of type string. We can fix this by making the age property as not required by adding a question mark here. Now the error is gone, and if you hovered over age property, you will find that age is of type number or undefined. Now you can do the same thing for the age argument inside this function, but only if this argument is the last one in the arguments list. Now if we add the question mark here, we will get an error saying that object is possibly undefined. Now you may be wondering why we have object here, not number. Well, that's because in JavaScript everything is an object, even functions. But you can find the type of the age argument as number or undefined. Now if we change the location of this argument and put it from the beginning here, you would get another error saying that a required parameter cannot follow an optional parameter. So if you add a question mark here, the error will disappear from the arguments list, but we will get many errors in the function and outside the function where we executed it. Now we don't want this. We want to change everything as it was. So let me remove this from here, put it there, and remove the question mark from the age argument. Now let's say that we want this function to accept the age as a number or as a string. We can do that by adding one vertical bar and adding the string type. Of course, we have to do the same thing for the return type of this function. Let me close this to have more space and add a bar here with the string type. Now the age here is of type string, number, or undefined. We can do the same thing for a variable. For example, for the first name here, let's add either a string or a number, or let's do it for the age. So here we have a number, let's add a string. Alright, now we can assign the age variable either to a number or to a string, like this.